Hi all. So today you're going to hear from Dan Fox. Now, Dan Fox has played both hockey for England and Great Britain. In 2015, he actually captained the Great Britain side in the World League finals. He was named Player of the Year in 2016. Why I wanted to talk to you, Dan, was because not only has he been a high-performing player with Great Britain and England, he's also been involved in coaching within the Great Britain and England setup. He now heads up the programme at Guildford Hockey Club, but he's also worked within schools, both here and other schools. And why I think it's really fascinating is because he has an unbelievable insight, therefore, in how hard and how at times joyous playing high-level hockey can be. I love talking to Dan. I think he's a fascinating individual who has had an incredible career. I always learn things, and the few bits and pieces that I really took from this, he was actually dropped in 2010, and listening to the interview, I hope you pick up a few ideas about how he dealt with those and how he looked internal and had some self-reflection. I think that's a hugely important thing. From a coach's point of view, I love his attitude towards a training session, making it competitive, not just doing 6-on-6 or 9-on-9, but actually breaking it down to things like 1-on-1s and 2 versus 2s, that competition in training. I really liked his ideas of culture. He talked about both kind of Olympic cycles, one when he was kind of on the border of it all and fighting for one place, and the other time when he was taking a much more of a leadership role within the group, but how leadership kind of filtered down and how different players within the group had different responsibilities. I really enjoyed talking. I could have talked for a lot longer, but as you can tell, at the end of the interview, we got interrupted by his little girl at the door, kind of crying. So Dan had to rush off after, which was brilliant. But I really thank him for his time. Have a watch. As ever, when you're watching this, try and have a notebook just to jot down a few points, because if you can take 1 or 2 things away that helps you as an athlete, as a coach, or as a parent, then it's priceless for me. Okay, enjoy. Excellent. So thanks, Dan, for joining. So for a person who now lives and works and has played in high performance programs, what does high performance mean to you?
For me, whether it's coaching or playing, high performance has always meant finding a way to be successful. And that's one time like a really broad answer, but also it's got some real nice specific details to that. So from an individual perspective, that can be how do you design your life? So how much you sleep, what you eat, how you approach training. And from running a program perspective, it's all the stuff that supports success, and success at the top end is normally based on results, but it's like a long process of how do you get there. And because the results are the hardest thing to control, it's all the fine detail of what does a training program look like, the number of people we have to have involved, how we identify those talented players in the first place, and then how do we develop them as athletes. And a lot of that is going to be the coaching on the pitch, but then it's also all the support that goes with that. And I think the closer you get to the top of a sport, the finer the detail becomes. So whether that's around your physical preparation, the stuff you do in the gym and with physiotherapy and stuff, or whether it's, stuff around psychology and nutrition, all the things that support not only your ability to perform in a match or a tournament, but also to train, to recover, to train properly the next time, and to continue that process of improvement. But yeah, it's always like a battle to find the best way to do that stuff.
And as a player, how did you define your own success? Was it very much based around the team, or was it individual goals did you set? Because, coming into a team sport like hockey and going through those Olympic cycles, was success kind of an end result of we want a medal or we want the gold? Or how did you see your own success, or what success was?
Yeah, it was always a real interesting balance, because you've got 32 blokes full-time training together, all trying to improve as a squad and as a team, but at the same time you're battling against those same people for selection into the first 16 and the starting 11. Now the tone of that whilst I was involved was really positive, and there was a lot of helping each other to improve. But it definitely meant there was a lot of like internal focused, what am I working on in my game to improve? We do a 3-monthly individual development plan, which had the focus for your game, which will be some technical stuff, it will be some physical stuff. There might also be like elements of, well, psychologically, how to approach games under pressure, or how do I train with intensity, that kind of thing. So as a marker of success for me, it was first of all identifying what my game's about. So what am I really strong at? Like we call them super strengths.
Yeah.
And how do I make sure that I kind of play around that? So the stuff I'm really good at, I'm going to deliver time and time again. And at the same time, you'd have 2 or 3 work-ons, so things that aren't the strongest part of your game, but you need to be successful. And on a given day, a given training session, that's probably the forefront of my mind. But then at the same time, you've always had threaded within that, it's like, how are we as a squad improving and working towards, and because it's an Olympic sport, you're working through a 4-year cycle, and probably every 2 to 3 months you'd have a target, as in a tournament or a set of games for you to win. And the dial on those was turned up or down. So we'd have Olympics every 4 years, and the 2 years between that you'd have a World Cup. So they were the big events where you had to peak and focus, and the result was everything. But in between that, you'd have, a set of test matches against Australia at home where results were very important, and we build the pressure to try and replicate what we'd face in the Olympic Games. So actually, there's a lot of stuff in there just focused around performance. So were we doing the stuff that was going to make us successful in the long term? And that could be stuff around the like our penalty corners, it could be stuff around our like small unit play, it could be about our team defence. But that's where we had more kind of process goals, I guess you'd call it.
And how, I guess a number of people's talk to me across all sports, the idea of going into these kind of training camps where it might be trials, or it might be suddenly there's 35 of you, and they're going to be kind of evaluating each player the whole time. So like you said, it's an interesting conundrum between creating a team environment and then actually being very competitive against the opposite person, because they're not going to take both of you. Did you struggle with that at all, that kind of pressure or that competition internally? Or was the culture of the GB hockey team that good? Because it with 35 or so different individuals, different personalities, it must be quite a hard ship to keep sailing in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah, and I had 2 very different experiences. So before London 2012, I was very much on the edge of that squad. And in fact, in 2010, I was dropped completely from the training program. I think at the time it was 30. And over the 2 years, worked my way back in, and then made the 16-man squad for London. And then for Rio, I was a bit more of a fixture in the squad. So the actual pressure and the stress, I guess, around selection, I felt less. But having had the experience of it, it was fascinating to have those 2 different sides of the coin. No doubt, when it came to selection for big tournaments, it had a real kind of an impact on the group, because whilst there was a really positive culture around performing together as a team and as a squad, and ultimately that's the only reason you're there, right? I mean, it's not just on a fundamental why we want to play level, but also for Great Britain hockey, unless you're successful consistently at tournaments, then the funding goes, the training program gets reduced. So everyone knows that as a basic level. The way that impacts on, I think, individuals leading up to selection varies dramatically, right? I mean, there's always an outward, let's do our best, like individual people are really striving, and you see that. But you also see like a lot more like niggle around on the pitch during those periods. So if I was to go back through the 4 years up to Rio, the sort of 7 or 8, like not scraps, but coming together on a pitch where people are shoving and pushing, they're all within 4 to 6 weeks of a big selection process.
Yeah.
And that's probably because people are just pushing themselves. You know, they're on the edge of what they can do. And then there's also stuff off the pitch that spills over. You know, if you just had a difficult conversation with a coach about where you stand in the squad, then you go onto the pitch and mistrap 3 balls. It's really hard to keep that level. What was good is I think people, because there was like a shared experience of selection, everyone knew it was coming. And like me, most people had the really difficult and then the slightly smoother path to selection. I think there's a lot of sympathy around that. And there's a lot of, you know, dust yourself off 20 minutes after training. People are like, yeah, okay, I'll step over the line there. That's fine. And
you have your own coping mechanisms. So I know, speaking to a few different athletes, some of them were kind of at the end of each session, they would kind of watch back footage of their training so they can kind of build their confidence up. They would, before or the end of a week or the beginning of a week, set targets or something, just take their mind off that selection. Did you have yourself just some coping mechanisms, or did you just kind of go, you know what, this is just tough and I've just got to get through it?
You know what, just generally with training, I just time away. So time doing something completely different. And I know what you mean. I know people in our squad who would go and watch video hour after hour after hour to try and find an answer to things. I think my realization was there'll be stuff on the pitch that happens when you're training and playing all the time that just happens. You know, there's no reason for it. You had a bad day, your touch wasn't quite right, you missed an opportunity, and you just need something else, which is very different. You know, and that could be, you know, spending time with friends. It could be going for a long walk. It could be playing a bit of five-side football. It could be anything. But what was really helpful was something that just wasn't me on the hockey pitch. And I was a bit older than some of the squad. You know, if you're married and you've got wife at home, you can, you know, that relationship for me was really useful because Jenny basically wouldn't talk about hockey when I got home, and if I had a big drama, I was like, you know, I've trained badly, selected coming, blah blah. She's like, look, you're lucky to be doing it. And it's like a real blunt sort of tough love thing. And I know also I'm pretty fortunate, probably my parents in the same boat, hugely supportive, but also, you know, at the end of the day, it's I think not forgetting that you're doing something which is I don't want to say privilege because you work hard to get there, but it's something which ultimately you strive to do your whole life, and there'll be some rough bits with it, and you just got to take that. I think give yourself a bit of space away from it, and that's really helpful.
And now working in your role, obviously at Guildford, but also your involvement with England 21s and England Hockey Performance Centres, and do you always have that in the back of your head, how hard it was with selection and how hard those weekends were, and nerves of driving up for 3 hours up to Lilleshall or wherever they're going? Do you now as a coach have that kind of thinking, actually, this is how I should be treating these athletes, or I know what they're going through? Do you think that's kind of giving you a bit of a, maybe a step up compared to some others who haven't been through the process themselves as athletes?
Yeah, I think so. My learning from that whole process was, unless you love it, you really, really want to spend your time doing it, then there's always going to be a knockback, which is too far. And looking at my cohort of players who grew up with me, the ones who made it to an Olympic Games or full international hockey, basically wanted to play hockey more than they wanted to do anything else, and they had a real deep-seated passion for that. And I know at 15, 16, 17, people are passionate about sport. And I think what you'll find as you go through all those like trials and tests, you know, the 3-hour car journeys, the tough selection decisions, just losing an important game, is if you're still fundamentally happy to be on the pitch, in my case, whacking the ball around, then you're doing the right thing. As soon as it becomes, I don't really want to train, I don't want to spend time doing it, then actually maybe it's time for a reflection. But everyone had a different view on that. My experience in 2012 around selection was so informative. So 2010 I was out of the squad, had a year where I was invited to some bits and pieces. I did all the conditioning around the programme, made my way back into the programme by 2011, having had like a difficult year where I sort of felt excluded from the main group. But then when it got to the 2012 selection, the actual process lasted 6 weeks. So in fact, so May the 6th, after the test event in London, they selected 10 players out of 16 and took another 8 of us, so 18 in total, to Malaysia for 3 weeks. So 8 of us knew that we were battling for the last 6 spots. In fact, 3 defenders, Adam Dixon, he's now a Great Britain captain, Ali Wilson and myself knew we were fighting for 2 spaces. And basically over the 3 weeks in Malaysia and a week when we got back, we were sort of drip fed information until finally got the phone call. And I probably remember more about that 6 weeks than the whole years of my career. So
it's an incredibly challenging time. An incredibly challenging time.
Yeah, particularly because it was London Olympics, so that is and my first. So that was, friends, family, all people could talk about at that time was the Olympic Games. You switch on the news, it was there, and it was very much an all or nothing, right? If I'd made that squad, probably afterwards I could continue and play. I was 29, right? So, and I played 4 more years. If I hadn't made that squad, that was probably it. That was, 40 international caps and probably the end of the road. And yeah, I mean, in the end, I got a phone call in my car 5 p.m. on a Monday afternoon saying, look, we've decided to take you. And yeah, genuinely life-changing moment. But there was the period leading up to that was incredibly stressful.
Did you change anything during that period? Once the selectors had chosen that 10 and there was suddenly 8 of you left, in that kind of 6-week period, did anything change in you? Was there like a more focus in training? Was there anything that kind of you consciously made decisions to change? Or because I guess every time you stepped onto a pitch, there must be huge levels of anxiety or potential anxiety.
Yeah, the big change for me came earlier. So when I was dropped in 2010, I mean that was a reasonable decision. We'd actually won a Champions Trophy silver medal on the Sunday afternoon, flew back from Germany, went on holiday 2 days later by text message. It's like, look, this is where you stand. You're not in the squad. We had a 3-week break, so I had 3 weeks to mull over what that meant for me. And I had a year where through club hockey and a few opportunities to train with the squad, and through my conditioning, I got back into the squad. But at that point, it was basically in my head, it was like, look, you can be as good as you can be and go for it. Absolutely blast what you can control. And then if they choose somebody ahead of you, then fair enough, that person has done a brilliant job, and you've done all you can. And that was really liberating for me on the pitch in particular, because I think before that, certainly performance-wise, it was quite anxious, big tournament, bit of a crowd, even a training session with the coaches watching. I'd always be conscious that, I don't want to make a mistake. The classic things around sports psychology that you want to avoid. And then from 2011 onwards, that period, because I knew that I'd basically been given a bit of a lifeline, thrown into the edge of this squad with a year out to the London Olympics, I was like, look, just go for it. What's the worst that can happen attitude. And what's difficult about telling people to do that is it's not something you can just switch on and off. Partly, I think that difficult experience for me gave me I've been through the tough year, what it's like.
I guess sometimes it's that fear of failure, isn't it? So sometimes you play your sport, you're so afraid to make a mistake that you're not actually allowing yourself to try and kind of push your talent. But then when you suddenly do get cut or you get dropped, that's the bad thing that's happened. So suddenly you're a bit like, well, this is the worst that can happen. Let's go back. When you were dropped, did they give you feedback to say this is why? Did they give you kind of constructive feedback with it?
Yeah, they did.
I guess.
Not that you design it like this, but because each year hockey typically big. So we led up to big tournament, Champions Trophy, and then there's a big break for the squad. So it was pretty much 3 weeks, and therefore I had 3 weeks without chatting to the head coach and the coaching team, where the only person I could talk to was myself or think about my performance. And what that did was it really made me work out what I'd been good at and where I'd kind of fallen short. And regardless of whether I agreed with it or not, it is what it is. It's like, look, we think these 28 players are in a stronger position than you. And so I think in my head, I was like, look, these are the 5 defenders or 7 defenders that I need to be better than. How am I going to do that? So that So I was almost forced into the process of self-reflection, which I think is probably the most important thing. You know, a coach only knows your game so much.
Yeah.
No matter how good they are or whatever level you get to, ultimately it's going to be you that knows exactly what makes you tick. And also, like, I can really do this, or this is a real strength I can build on, or I know I'm weaker at this, but I think I can overcome that by doing X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, because I guess that's the part to it, isn't it? That self-reflecting, particularly when kind of athletes are young, is so hard to do, to actually have a look at themselves and think, where do I really sit? How do I compare, not just to people in my own age group, but those who are older? When I enter into a Guildford team or a Surbiton, East Greenside, whatever side it may be with hockey, to actually look at the players who are kind of on the verge of international and saying, well, what are they so good at that I need to? What is my super strength? Or what is actually, if I turned up to a session, where would I be shown up? And it is hard sometimes, that self-reflection, to go, actually, I train hard, but I don't train hard enough, or I'm fit, but I'm not quite fit enough.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly if you're a an outstanding young sportsman, you might look around in your school or your club or even your region, and you might be the strongest player there. You might have the best set of skills in this area or that. So seeking out people who do stuff better than you is sometimes quite difficult, just from a practical perspective. But that's what's going to give you clarity around, okay, that's what the top level looks like. And in some sports, you can see that because there's more stuff on television. There's more opportunities to see, like, analyze content. But yeah, I'd really recommend, that's the sooner you become a bit of a student of the game and see what good looks like, the quicker you can make that process around your own game. Like, okay, this is the stuff that's going to make me a top player, and that's really satisfying, right? It's not let's get focused on the detail and forget why I'm playing and enjoying the sport. It's actually find the stuff you're good at, do it really well, and it's going to give you a lot of satisfaction. It's going to show that you're going to improve quickly, all the stuff that actually makes you enjoy playing.
And kind of jumping, I guess, out of your playing career now into your coaching, are there certain attributes where you were involved with the England setup, where certain attributes that you're looking for in these athletes? So when you're turning up to these camps or you're analysing players, are there certain things that you think are like the non-negotiables, those factors that you're looking at going, they're a good player, but I'm really looking for this? Do you have something in your mind that you look for? Is it just a gut instinct? Or
yeah, I think sport generally is becoming much more aware of, like, the culture stuff that makes someone a good player, but also a great teammate. And for me, that's hugely important. So people who turn up to a session, say hello to everyone and shake their hands, and say during a team talk, give people a pat on the back, stuff like that, as fundamental, like being good people, will get you a long way in sport. And without it, it's very tricky. Being a difficult character is difficult for you to continue to progress through the pathway, and they're learned behaviors, right? So it's not that at 14 years old or 12-year-olds or 10 years old, someone turns up and they don't display those behaviors and you write them off. They're things that can be coached alongside, how you hit the ball or push it. But as advice to a young person coming into the pathway in hockey, either at international level or club level, that stuff is really important, and seeing how top players do that stuff is really valuable. And then the one on the pitch, which I think in hockey in particular shows up, is how, I guess you might call it, how relentless people are around their execution of good stuff. And often, I mean, people say, what's the difference between an international player and a strong club player? And typically it's the real simple stuff they can deliver over and over again, which allows them to do the spectacular or be incredibly effective. So people who, even when they train, are stopping, passing, hitting, running back, making tackles, but in a way that they're doing it in the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes without you knowing which is which, is such a a great attribute for a young sports person, because you know that not only are they going to be able to deliver on the pitch when they play, but also in training they're going to improve quickly over time, because it's that application in training that delivers like continual improvement, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because that really kind of hits home across a lot of sports, but also kind of speaking to other kind of high performing athletes and coaches, that kind of relentless, that attitude in training, that ability when they turn up, they just make other players better because they're just willing to go. I remember speaking to Izzy Petter, and she spoke about the real eye-opener she had when she first joined the kind of high performance program with England and GB hockey was just how fit athletes were. So it was one thing being fit for her age, it was one thing being fit for club hockey. There was suddenly another step up where it's not just about, oh, you can hit a test score. It's actually you're doing the test twice over and you're being able to go again because the speed of the game was so much quicker.
Yeah, and hockey is definitely a sport which has become increasingly, I don't want to say physique based, because it's actually size isn't as important as, it's like your aerobic capacity, repeat sprint, speed over short distances. But that stuff is probably where the biggest change in the game has come over the last 10, 15 years. And what hockey players look like now compared to, say, the early 2000s is substantially different. And that's because you've got more full-time programs, more full-time players, but definitely at the top level where you've got people who can deliver the basics almost equally well, actually your athleticism and physical capabilities are a really important part of the game, and because it allows you to do the other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it certainly does. And then you talked about culture. So coming to your role, because you've obviously been at head of hockey at another school, you're now at Guildford, you've been involved in all these kind of teams where culture is a big thing, and across all sports, whether it's James Kerr's book about culture and the importance of it. When you came into Guildford, obviously you wanted to put a certain culture in place. What do you have those non-negotiables? Are there certain things now that are the cornerstone of building I guess what you want is that winning culture, as much as, yes, it's about enjoyment, but at the top end, you want to win.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and over the last year, we've kind of crystallised those cultures that we want to deliver. And the first one's teamwork. We've got creativity, passion, and respect. And the reason the process we use to come up with those is, well, what's going to be meaningful to somebody who's playing hockey when they're 8 or 10 years old, entirely like for recreation because they like playing with their friends, but also going to deliver performance hockey at the top end for our under 16s, under 18s and adult sides. I think they're hugely important because you're dealing with, we've got 800 kids, we've got 300 adults. Some of them their potential will be international hockey, and for a lot of them the success will be, do they keep playing hockey when they leave us at 18, or if they move to a different area as an adult. And for me that's a huge, particularly from working in a school, that's a hugely important marker of success. Do people want to continue and carry on? So the starting point for those values has been relatively soft touch. They're more a reflection of what we already do, all the good stuff that we do, and now we're kind of trying to reflect those back into the groups. And actually our weekly planning for training and how we organize squads is now focused around those. So actually the emphasis will be on creativity for the week or teamwork for the week, and we'll pick that apart and it'll be an element of that. And it could be very practical. It could be like, this week we're going to look at how we run team talks during a session in between quarters of a match and things like that. It could be something more like, well, actually this week it's going to be all about making sure everybody in that age group of 70 under 10s knows each other's names, like real basic stuff. But that's been really successful in that people like to have that as an explicit focus rather than just stuff we do, because it kind of brings people along. And as I said earlier, I think that they're learned skills, right? I mean, like you being considered like a good bloke or a great teammate or whatever it is not something you have or you don't at the age of 10. It's just It's learned based on your interactions with other people, like the examples that other people set, and that's been really important for us. Like, how do we actually reinforce those, praise those things, make sure they're widespread across the club? And then as you move through age groups or into adult hockey, you see things you recognise, you feel comfortable. You've got that safe place from which you can then take risks and experiment and learn and improve, and all the other stuff which can be tricky around hockey and selection and all that stuff becomes a lot easier.
And so with your, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but then when you went, so obviously you had London 2012, and then you were a bit more of an established member in the squad. How, as a kind of, I guess you must have been one of the older players at that time, because you were quite late into hockey, I guess, and you obviously, not obviously, but you went to Oxford and you kind of went through maybe a bit more of a unique route, I guess, than some others. Did you take a lead role, or did others take a lead role in kind of establishing the culture from 2012 to 2016? And I guess I'm probably looking for more kind of a practical sense of, again, within a school environment, we'll have some of the kids who are watching this who are very talented in their age group, and because of their talent are therefore looked at by others as leaders. And I guess what I'm kind of intrigued to know about is, even at the top end, how did you leaders really lead, rather than just saying the right thing? Were there practical examples you can give me?
Yeah, we definitely had lots of levels of leadership. So if you looked at anybody in the squad, you could say, look, they're demonstrating leadership here or here or here. So if I give you some examples, so we had people who were in charge of penalty corner defence, and in fact we broke that down into number one running, people who stood on the line, blockers. So you might have 5 people in the squad plus 2 goalkeepers, all of whom have a role in leading penalty corner defence, and they might organise video debrief sessions, they might organise training sessions. In fact, on Thursdays we had a 3-hour pitch slot, in which time you could book you might only do an hour and a half or 2 hours of that, but within the group we'd organise what to do, we'd set ourselves some targets, we'd be creative around how we practiced it, and that's a good example on the pitch of where people owning what we did was valuable, because it led to improvement. It's just more people inputting, but also I think when we were successful, people got a massive kick out of that. And also when we struggled, there was responsibility on a lot of people to improve it, right? It's like looking around the room, it's not just head coach, why is this not working? It's 7 or 8 of us getting our heads together and going, this is stuff we need to nail. And that was really valuable. And then just across the squad off the pitch, we did similar stuff. So actually it's like, we've got a big trip away for 3 weeks to Australia. On that trip, there is a captain, but there's also 4 or 5 people who are overtly given leadership roles, but they'd have stuff to do within that. So whether that's organising our time off the pitch, so our recreation time, someone takes a lead on that, and then they get 3 or 4 people around them to go, what's the right balance when we're out there between making sure we have some time to decompress, but also we're relaxed and we're ready to go when we're training. And those layers, I think, work really nicely in school sport. It's very easy to have a captain and 15 players, whereas actually probably there's a whole bunch of stuff that people can take a lead on, and it could be very practical, like who picks the ball, who picks the balls up, is rather than that being a rubbish job at the end of training. Actually, if 3 or 4 people are in charge of the kit and they've got something to do, they need to be there 15 minutes early, they take a bit of pride in it. Someone else is in charge of your forward line and your pressing and stuff like that. You all of a sudden, leadership becomes a real shared responsibility. Everyone benefits from it, and they also feel more part of the path to success as a team.
And now, as a coach, you're obviously running a vast number of sessions, but one of the big eye-openers I think a lot of the pupils here have had when they've gone and watched some high-performance sessions is just the speed and the intensity. And speaking again to people previously about how actually in training sometimes it's of a higher intensity than the matches. How do you as a coach get that across to the players? How do you manage to potentially give them an eye-opening experience to go, this is what a real session should feel like?
That's a great question. That's like the $1 million. If you can achieve that as a coach, you know, people come off the pitch and they've given everything. It's been a brilliant session, and in my head, how I judge that is, you know, if it can be with a certain group, a lot of noise at the end of a session. You know, one team's beating another team, and it's just a Thursday afternoon, essentially a meaningless 6v6 practice. But it means everything in that moment. You've done a great job. It could just be that there's like loads of good conversations happening at the end of a session because you've done something tactical or technical that they think, right, focus. So how do you do that as a coach? Well, to be honest, it's probably something that you can't just step on the pitch and do from minute one of session one. It's something that you need to build through your training cycle. But definitely having meaning to a session is hugely important. And with the Great Britain Development Programme, every session will have some element of competition in there. And essentially that, you know, we're playing invasion sport. Normally two teams, there's a direction to attack in, there's normally goals, and there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. And having something on that, even if it's just who picks up the kit at the end, is an important habit to get into. Like every tackle, every pass, every dribble, that counts. You know, if you do it well, then brilliant. But if you step off the gas, even in minute one, that can cost you at the end of the session. So I would say actually what a training session would look like if you came and I coached, there would be quite a lot of games-based approach to it. And that's not to say within that there wouldn't be some stuff where we break out and work on some details, some tactics, maybe some technical stuff. But whatever you do is going to matter. And at the end, there's going to be a group of players who've probably won, and there's probably going to be a group of players who haven't.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting part, isn't it, to put competition into training. And like I said, it's interesting that the higher up you go, the more intense that training is, and players are really putting themselves into game scenarios and game positions so that they can feel confident when they're suddenly going into an international game or a professional match that, you know, they've experienced it 3 times during the week. So actually the match on a Saturday is just a continuation from the training that they've done during the week. Whereas I think particularly at younger age groups, they find it quite hard to understand that. So they'll go from maybe being at 50% and on a Friday be a bit more focused, maybe up to 70%, but they've never really trained those skills or scenarios at match pace with match intensity where next goal wins. You know, the last minute of a game, how do you see it out? And it's a real challenge, isn't it? Minute one in a session as a coach, I think you have to lay down that marker that you're here to improve. To improve, you've got to be thinking, you've got to be on it, because otherwise you're just going through the motions.
Yeah, and I think that conversation is good, right? I mean, why do people like playing sport? It's to be outside, to spend time with their friends, to have fun, but it's definitely to learn and improve, and that sense of satisfaction you get from that. I believe that basically that's what everyone wants to do on the hockey pitch, and at the hockey club we have, you know, back to hockey with 50 and 60 year olds who haven't played for 20 years, and they really get a buzz out of learning new stuff. Now, when you're young and coming up through the age groups, then actually there's, you know, the appetite for learning tends to be way up, right? So it's almost you're preaching to the converted. But I think, yeah, as a coach, that sort of stuff is gold dust, and probably we do quite a lot of individual. So we'll play some gameplay, but within that there'll be a lot of 1v1 and 2v2, and that is a good way to show that there's an outcome based on what you do on the pitch. So if you break a 6v6 down into a load of 15-second 1v1, and you're working on your defensive, your tackling, your channeling, your ball winning, if you're not at the races, then the other person's going to score a goal because it's 1v1, right? Whereas if you're in a 9v9 training session, you can probably coast through that and no one will notice apart from you and maybe your opposite number. So that is a really interesting challenge. But you're right, building that in from the start is absolutely crucial, because there is a bit of turning the dial up and down. Because if your training session is always super competitive, you probably lose a bit of the experimentation, the creativity. So you need a bit of both. So a bit of light and shade. You need an opportunity for people to do stuff where it doesn't matter as much if they mess it up because they've tried something. but without one, the other doesn't work. I think you've got to have both sides of that.
And I know I'll keep for like 5-10 more minutes, but we're both now at an age where sport has changed from when we were probably our early 20s. That would have been nearly 14-15 years ago, showing our age here. But it's changed, hasn't it? But you obviously went to Oxford and university and then did that route. And hockey still, I know it is professional at that top end, is still an amateur sport. A lot of, I guess what I'm asking for is a bit of advice here regarding the pupils who are looking to potentially do university and top end hockey at the same time. And the struggle that they sometimes have with that in terms of their time and can they do both. Did you find that back in Oxford? How did you handle both developing as a hockey player and your studies, or is it just too different going back?
So I applied to Oxford. Obviously, academically, it's a great place to go. At the time, it was one of only 2 National League hockey universities. So there's Loughborough and Oxford. So I think a big change now is if you are a really promising young hockey player, you've got the choice of 15 universities that play National League hockey and have a great training program. So you're in a strong position, and should you go somewhere like that, you're going to have both opportunities, right? You're going to be able to go and do a great degree and be able to train at a level which will allow you to push your game to where you want to take it. And that, I think, is really valuable, because realistically, some people will go to university as an 18-year-old who may have even played junior international hockey and realise over those 3 or 4 years that they want to play serious hockey, but it's not what their life is going to revolve around. You'll also get a lot of young people who go to university, get the real buzz from playing hockey at a high level with the support services, the strength and conditioning, the physiotherapy, the extra training sessions, and go, look, this is what I want to do. And I guess my advice would be, you'll definitely have time for both, but it will take some skills around it. And I would say, particularly having worked at a boarding school and spent time at Cranley, a lot of your time is organised for you, so you know where you've got to be and when. Yeah. And it's going to be a significant change going to university, where from minute 1 to 10 o'clock at night or later, you've got to organise your own time. So at university, I played hockey all the way through for 4 years, and in my 3rd and 4th year, I played academy cricket, so which still exists in a slightly different format now. But I found there was enough time. I was always crazy busy, and when I left at 22, I still had the time to go and play. I was in a hurry then, but I went to a National League Premier Division club and went for it and designed my life around that. I mean, I was a part-time teacher, having done a PGCE, but it gave me the time to train alongside work, which I needed to pay the bills. And I'm not saying that's the route that I would suggest for everyone, but certainly university and sport, cricket, hockey, work really well together. And then I think that's probably where my expertise ends. There's other sports where the process is different, but for a hockey player now, you almost sport for choice. There's so many good programs, and they'll let you do a great degree at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that going back to a point much earlier on about whether you love it or not, because at schools, when sessions are laid on for you, or maybe your parents are driving you to club and back, it's slightly easy just to get in the car, switch off and there. But actually, the older you get, the more you've got choices, and if you love it, you love it. And actually, sometimes what happens is you start to have to make some sacrifices. You don't have to make huge sacrifices, but I guess those sacrifices, you start to decide, actually, is it worth it? Do I love the game enough to not necessarily go out on certain nights, or do I love it enough to, on a Tuesday and Thursday night, to get in the car to drive myself 20 minutes down the road to get to somewhere? Do I love it enough on a Sunday to be going across the country to play hockey? Mm-hmm. And I guess that's something that is hard to know until you're in it, to really whether you truly love it or not.
Yeah, I mean, and even now, having been through it, I look at some of the under-21 development programme. We were in Nottingham training. You've got lads travelling up from Exeter or down from Durham for a day's hockey, and I think this is, there's some testing there, right? You've got to really want to do the stuff. I mean, I think my weekend routine was Sunday night, power bag, Monday, go to work until 4 o'clock. train to Bisham Abbey, 2.5 hours on the pitch, train home, get back at midnight, work on Tuesday, then go to Enfield in London from at S&C, go to training Tuesday night, get home, go to work on Wednesday, and Wednesday at 4 o'clock, I like catch my breath, having not sat down for 2.5 days. And I think even when I finally made it into the senior squad full time, I used to look back and go, I can't believe I did that. But at the time, it was never in doubt. You know, the opportunities opened up for me. I got the phone call to say, look, do you want to be on this S&C program because we think you might be an international hockey player in the future? And it was always just a yes. And, you know, things will work, but it was yes for me because I think that's what I wanted to do. It was, I was very passionate about the sport. And basically when I got on the pitch, I enjoyed it always. And, you know, that's not to say on a cold, dark evening I was having a brilliant time for 2 hours, but I always thought this is what I want to do. And you only really, I think, get to make that decision by saying yes to the opportunities, and then you can make an informed decision at that point. Then.
And I've got 2 more questions really. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and it's always hard because it's like the butterfly effect. You change one thing, other things may not have come. But looking back on your career, are there certain things you would have done differently now? Now being a high-level coach, you probably know a lot more than you did as a player. Are there things you would have taken into yourself as a player and gone, I should have done this or that, or this is something I'd have focused a bit more of my attention on?
Yeah, that is a great question. I count myself lucky that there were moments like that selection for London 2012 which were on a knife edge and went for me. I would definitely say to my younger self, aged 22 to 24, 25, when you first start out at international hockey, and this applies to anyone stepping up a level, it's no one is looking at you expecting you to make a mistake or worried about you doing things badly. They're just looking to see what you offer. So I think when I went into the program initially, I was more anxious about performing than was helpful, and that held me back for the first couple of years. Whereas a mindset of, look, I have got stuff to offer, this is why I'm here in the first place, I'm going to focus on that and not worry about, you know, stuff that I'm not as good at, or there are acceptable things that in the long term I'm going to improve, or the medium term I'm going to really nail and show off my strengths, because certainly from a coaching perspective now, when new people come into the squad, that's 100% what you want to see. There are things that you're going to improve and work on, and that's absolutely fine. You're there because you've got strengths, so like really show them off. Yeah, that would probably be my advice to my 22-year-old self, I think.
And then the final one, angled really more at your coaching now. We always continue learning, but are you basing your coaching off a certain individual that coached you? Was there certain things that a certain coach or a certain experience you had that's now shaping you as a coach that you always fall back on? Or is it just every day you're learning, you're improving, you're watching others? Yeah, kind of you as a coach yourself. Is it based around your experiences as a player?
Yes.
About the coaches that you've kind of seen? Because obviously you're now into that world of having a huge experience in 2 very different sides of sport, the player and the coach. And, you know, if both are working together, amazing. But you do look at it from 2 different sides of a coin.
Yeah, and probably the best people at any role are always finding new bits and cherry picking what suits them for like a constant improvement. When I retired, I would say my coaching owed a lot to the head coaches that run the Great Britain program and the assistant coaches that work with it. I was lucky in the next 2, so 2016 to 2018, I did a fair bit of work still with the senior squad, some specialists around short corners, but it just meant I was in the environment. And in that time, I had a lot more focus on actually how are people delivering the sessions. And so the current head of the elite development program and under 21s for Great Britain Hockey, John Bleavy, I think he probably is the person I associate most closely with. He's got like a real bit of steel to his coaching. You know, he's pretty firm about stuff. And that for me is good, because I would say I'm fairly like affable and form like friendships and things around sport. And I'm not a naturally stern but I know that steel is so important on the pitch, particularly as players.